powerful episode of Pleasure Principles. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving deep into a subject that impacts every single one of us: relationships and how to make a healthy decisions within them. Yeah. So now, whether you are single or maybe in a relationship or a situationships, married, divorced, remarried, or just trying to figure out how not to text back your ex at 2 a.m., then this episode is for you. Yeah. So, joining us today is someone who truly embodies the journey of love, growth, reinvention, and the resilience. So, please welcome Charisse Walker. So, welcome to the show, Charisse.
Well, thank you for having me. Hello.
Amazing, amazing, Jerry. So, before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners. So, dear listeners, Cheris is an author, investor, speaker, and Emmy-nominated TV host. She's also a mom of six, a life coach, and the voice behind Unbreakable Mompreneurs. Her book, Flipping the Iceberg, dives into the deeper layers of relationships, and today she's going to help us flip our own. So, dear listeners, grab your tea, take a breath, and let's get real about love, decisions, and the beauty that lies beneath the surface. So, welcome to the show, Cherries.
Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. So, Cheris, like your journey has traversed like single motherhood, remarriage, and entrepreneurship, and coaching others. So, what's the biggest relationship lesson that you have learned across all the chapters? So, what do you say?
I think the biggest relationship lesson that I've learned is that you have to love yourself before you ever can consider getting into another relationship. Because if you don't love yourself, then you're not going to make the healthy decisions that you should when choosing somebody to spend your time and your life with.
Hmm, got it, got it. And like, was there a pivotal moment that shifted the way you made the decisions in your personal life or the personal relationships?
Yeah, when I was in my first marriage, I remember asking my mother in law, it had been, I think it was going on 14 years. And I said, I called her by name and I said, what did your son want to do when he grew up? And she
Okay.
thought for a minute and she goes, I don't know. And I said, isn't it interesting that, 13,
Yeah.
14 years later into this marriage, she still doesn't know?
Mhm.
She goes, I'm sorry, Charisse. And it was at that point that I realized that, and that being diagnosed with MS in a doctor's office, that something was gonna have to change in my life, in my children's life, and in my marriage because it was literally taking me down and soon to kill me. My body was shutting down, and so I realized that it's not okay, and then fast forward, we separated for quite a long time, and, about 6 or 7 months later, we went to our first counseling session, and I realized at that point nothing had changed with him, a lot had changed with me, and that he was just waiting me out so that he could come back into the house, and no, that wasn't gonna happen, and so, it really woke me up that, okay, I can't continue to do this anymore, and as much as I wanted to try to make the marriage work, you have 2 people in a relationship, and if 2 people aren't willing to make it work, then it's not going to work, you have to have both people, and again, fast forward later after the divorce when I wanted to go to a dance, I love to dance, and, um I went to, like, ask permission to my husband, who I never didn't have a husband anymore, and I realized at that point that my whole life, like, I mean, my adult life at that to that point, because I got married too young, was I was asking permission. I was letting someone else control my decisions, my life, everything, and I realized I have freedom now, and I get to choose who I am, I get to choose who I choose to spend my time with, and I'm not beholden to anybody. If I wanna be with them, it's because I want to be with them, not because I feel like I have to be. And so, I mean, there's a lot of aha wake up moments, but those are a few of them.
Mm, okay, okay. So, Lovely. And like I think that a lot of us try to kind of logic our way through love, but your story actually reminds me that some of the deepest lessons come from learning into discomfort and trusting what unfolds. So that's really powerful. Yeah.
Mhm. I like that, learning the discomfort. That's very, very true.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then like your book, Flipping the Iceberg, it talks about discovering what lies beneath the surface in the relationships. So what do you think most people miss before saying I do?
So, aside from the self-love part, like, you really truly need to know who you are and what you want, and, making sure that for me, I was super codependent, and I didn't even know that I was codependent, but I was. I was very codependent, and so when you are where you feel like you have to have somebody else by your side all the time, you are willing to forego that intuition that you hear. Um, I was literally on my wedding day. I heard a voice say, "Charisse, get up and run." And I looked around and I'm like, "Who's around?" Like nobody's around me. Who was that? And I know exactly it was God. I know that I was being told this isn't the right decision, and I knew it all along, but I didn't know what a commitment was at that point. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I really didn't. I was 19, and, um,
Yeah.
every other relationship, my dad had always said, "You should always continue to date until you're
Mm.
engaged." And so I think that people really truly need to know who they are, but the next step is once they feel like, "Okay, I can be healthy," they need to understand that the icebergs, the traumas that they experienced are like icebergs, and if they don't flip them, they're not gonna know what it affected him. But let's fast forward to part 2 of the book, and I don't feel like, many people really take the time to have those hard conversations when they're dating because it's awkward, because they don't wanna get in a fight, because they don't even know what they don't know. And so, being willing to ask those hard questions and have those conversations that are gonna be uncomfortable, that is key, because if you don't know how to communicate, if you don't know how to problem solve, if you don't know how to do conflict resolution, your relationship is I don't wanna say doomed, but
Mm.
it's gonna have a lot of work ahead.
Mm. True. I agree. I agree. Like, I mean, if someone's already married and realizing that there were things they missed, what now? So,
Mhm.
how do they begin that deeper discovery process? What do you say?
Great question. So I'm actually working on part 2. It's the after the I
Okay.
do.
Okay. Okay.
And really, this is a tough one because, I was actually watching this old movie last night. I didn't finish it. It was kinda boring, but, it had Carol Burnett and Alan Alda in it, and they're going for a hike. There's these 3 best friends, and this one guy Alan says, "Oh, my wife, I can't believe I get to wake up to her every single day, and I love her more today than I even did yesterday, and I can't imagine that could ever have been the case." And his friend said, "Wow, I've never had that in my marriage." He goes, "She doesn't excite me, she doesn't spark me, she doesn't do anything." And so he ends up leaving her. And um, I thought about that because I felt the word I've started using is trapped, and I don't try to take that lightly, but trapped is something where you feel like you're stuck and you don't know how to get out. So, a good example was somebody very near and dear to me that I love. She was in a relationship with her husband where both of them did things they shouldn't have done. Both of them were not innocent, but they both wanted to work it out. And so they went off for hours and they just had this heart to heart conversation, said, "Let's put it all out on the table. Let's figure this out. And I want it to work. Do you?" And both of them said yes. And so they were able to recreate that relationship and they worked. And there's probably one of the tightest couples I know now.
Right.
And I mean, it took time, but I think selfishness is such a big thing now where it's, "Oh, I'm over you," or "We've grown apart." Okay, we'll get back together, you know?
Mm.
There's a reason you married him in the first place, and maybe we need to start there. Why did you marry them?
Yeah.
What was the reason? If there was a wrong reason, like in my relationship, I used to blame my husband or the ex for a lot of stuff, but when I started writing the book, I realized I was very guilty of a lot of things, and, there's things in my childhood that affected me so deeply, and I had no clue, how deep it was, and that affected my relationship, and so it's like, okay, you have to be willing to be authentic and vulnerable. So I wish that I would have gone to this person and said, "Here's how I'm feeling, here's where I'm at, here's what I've done, um, and I want this to work." But again, there's a much as Paul Harvey says, there's the rest of the story, and as much as I wanted that to happen, and I did really try, it you have to have 2 people.
Mhm.
So,
Exactly.
when you're married, you've gotta be able to come together, and I almost envision it like knee to knee and just put it all
Mm.
out there.
Understood. Understood. That idea of beginning again inside the relationship, it feels so counterintuitive in a world where kind of we are told to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love actually how you are inviting people to dive, I mean, dig deeper inside of, um, instead of kind of giving up. So yeah,
Mhm. Yep.
and also you have coached people in the business, real estate, and life. So are there any common patterns in how people make unhealthy choices, like whether it's in love or in careers?
Yes, lack of confidence, insecurities, and it really is that imposter syndrome, like,
Yeah.
for a long, long time, I tried to be the pleaser and the
Okay.
peacemaker, and so I didn't want anybody mad at me, so I would bend over backwards, and I didn't have any boundaries, and so I let people walk all over me, and when you do that, you're not happy with yourself, and you tend to be very, I tended to be very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Where you don't attack other people, but you judge other people. I can't remember I can't critical,
Mhm.
thank you. Critical of the word of the people, and so that's a hard person to be around when you're constantly criticizing other people because you don't feel good about yourself. So self-esteem is something you really have to figure out, and you have to find it gets back to self-love, and so I think in a business relationship or you have to have those boundaries and people need to know where you're at and you have to be willing to follow through with those boundaries. Like I had a boss one time where I was the director of a college and we were growing the school. Had gone from 1 to 4 colleges. And so I was very instrumental in helping with that and getting a lot of the programs accredited. And um, when they hired another director to open up the school, I trained him. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, he had more education, like a piece of paper. I had a master's, he had a PhD. So I'll give him that. But my experience and my time in what I did was far superior to his and what I've been able to accomplish. And so when I found out he was making $30,000 more than me, and he was being flown back and forth by the company, and they were paying for him to stay in a hotel because his family didn't wanna move. Um, that ticked me off, to say the least. I'm like, "Whoa, wait a second." And so I went to them and said, "This isn't right, and I want a pay raise." Now let's get without talking about discrimination and the whole story and what happened, they said, "Okay, yeah, we'll give you a $10,000 bump." And I said, "No." That's not enough, and so I chose to go somewhere else, and so that's the boundaries that you have to be willing to walk away if you're not happy with the results, and so that's something that, know that the grass might not be greener, but usually things happen for a reason, and if you follow your intuition and if you're religious, if bring divine intervention into it, then you know when to do it. And I think that's the other thing is your intuition. You have to listen to it and you have to learn to listen to it because it will talk to you way better than your brain will.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm. So, uh, okay, and like, what's the one practical strategy that someone can use today to start making clearer and aligned decisions?
Great question. So my book, Flipping and Iceberg are acronyms. So flipping is the acronym for self-healing. So F stands for finding your iceberg. So you need to figure out what because we all have those. Like, if I were to ask you, what are some childhood memories that stick out to you that were a little traumatic? And I'm not gonna ask you to tell me, right? But you could probably think of a few, right? Are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm saying, yeah, I really got it. I mean, because I never thought of um, uh, decision making as a muscle, but
Mhm.
uh, kind of that analogy really lands.
Yeah.
The reps that we do daily, um, I mean, uh, to shape like how we show everywhere in the love, business, self worth, anywhere. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And, I mean, those little things that happened as a child, whether your parents said something like my dad one time came into my room and he bawling said, "Charisse, please don't turn out like your sisters."
Mhm.
Right? Well,
Uh,
okay, dad, yeah, I'm going to because I wanna see you hurt and cry even more. Of course, I'm not gonna do that, right? So I ended up going the exact opposite, and my sisters were these horrible people and stuff, but I became a pleaser because I wanted to make sure that nobody hurt and that everyone was getting along and that there was peace, and so that was, something that stood out to me, and so because of that and I'm not blaming that one situation, but what I'm saying is there's different things in your childhood and early childhood rearing where they stood out, and those things have affected who you are today, and so good or bad, if you focus on some of those bad, okay, I am insecure because blah. And if you can figure out, okay, how did this iceberg affect me? That's how you find the iceberg. How can I heal from that? How can I fix that? How can I maybe go and approach the person that hurt you so badly? Like my daughter in seventh grade, a boy called her ugly. And so for 5 years, she believed she was ugly. And she wanted, she just she wanted to hide, and so then she graduates and she cuts her hair and her entire confidence level completely changed. She felt, "Oh, I am beautiful and I do have things to offer." And so if we can figure out what our icebergs are and heal from those or face them and say, "You're not going to take me anymore," that's probably the first step that you could start.
very truly said, I have to say. Very, very true. And um, like a bit of contradiction. But it's not. But some people say that love should be unconditional, and others argue that love with conditions, aka kind of boundaries, is healthier. So, what's your take?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, there's a
Yeah.
difference, I
Yeah.
think, between unconditional love, like, you love the person no matter what.
Yeah.
Perfect example, my best friend,
Mhm.
I'm $200,000 poorer
Mhm.
than I was, or in a family member, I'm $200,000 poorer than I was before I decided to go into a business deal with
Mm.
both of those people. Yeah, add up, that's
Mhm.
400,000. So, I love those people unconditionally. I still love them. If they were to ever call me and say, "Hey, Sharice, I'm really going through this," I would be there in a heartbeat, no questions.
Mhm.
However, am I ever going to give them any more money or go into business with them again? Heck to the no. So, I think that those conditions would be more of a boundary that I love you, I'm here for you,
Mhm.
I'll always love you, but, um, you know, once a cheater, always a cheater. I don't necessarily believe that, but if you have somebody that cheated on you, okay, let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about why, and can we fix that? Okay, you know what? I want this to continue to work, so let's continue to move through this relationship. But if it happens again, well, you know what? Uh-uh. I'm not going to continue to be your doormat. And so I think that there's a huge distinction that you have to make, and those are called boundaries. So you can absolutely love somebody, but you should have some boundaries of how you should be treated, and if that person violates those, then,
Yeah.
as much as you love them, it doesn't mean you need to stay with them.
Exactly. Mhm. So, like, have you ever had to redefine like what unconditional love meant to you personally?
Yes,
Can.
absolutely. Uh, Somebody very, very close to me, I'll probably get emotional talking about this, I thought I was over it, but, I was hurt more deeply than I think I've ever been hurt in my life, and I think it's because I love that person so incredibly much, and I put him on a pedestal, and I really thought that, everything was bliss and wonderful, and, uh, it wasn't. Completely didn't know that the iceberg was definitely not flipped, and there was something that was very, very deep that I had no clue about until, quite frankly, it was too late. So, it took me an hour and a half, an hour, I wish, a year and a half to get over that, and it took me a lot of time on my knees and a lot of time in in some solace places just trying to overcome the pain that happened, and that person, when I thought nothing could ever keep me from loving you and being okay, that completely changed, and so that person's a real person to me now, they're not this, like, fantasy. You know, I think I was screwed up watching as a kid, it was called Slipper in the Rose, and I talk about this in my book because it was kind of a Cinderella story, and they live happily ever after. Prince Charming comes and sweeps her off her feet and blah, blah, blah. That is not reality, and if anybody thinks that it is, that's just I mean, good for you, and I hope that someday and some people find that, but we have a hard life that we're meant to go through difficult things together, and so that doesn't mean that, you hear those people and say, "Oh, I've been married 30 years, we've never had an argument." Yeah, you have. You've had discussions. If you didn't fight, you didn't yell, that's one thing, but the unconditional love, for me, that did change because I used to think it was possible, but if there's some things that somebody would do and those boundaries were created, I would probably say I'm gonna walk away, like, "The enough is enough. I'm not going to put up with this anymore."
Okay. Hmm. True. And like understood. So what's the one decision that you are most proud of in love? So what do you have to say?
Wow. Learning to walk away when I knew I needed to, when I knew I didn't want to. So glad we're not recording as I'm super teary-eyed, and learning to stay when I did wanna walk away. Those, I think, are the 2 most proud because both times were very, very difficult, and, uh, following, again, that intuition, knowing when it was time to leave and when it was not not time to leave, I guess, 2 different relationships, both very, very difficult, so I think those are my most proud of because I stayed and I fought, and,
Mhm.
um, still going strong because of that.
Okay. Okay. Mhm. So, okay, and like, what do you hope like your legacy around relationships will be? I mean, especially for those for your children and uh, those you coach.
And so the legacy I want is the sanctity of marriage, that it is something that we should strive for, and it is
Yeah.
something we should fight for. Because in a world where 70% of the marriage rate has declined by 70%, and we can say divorce rate is 50, 60% because it is, but my bigger concern is the decline in marriage. Since 1970,
Mhm.
60% of marriages, like it has declined, and yet 70% of people are now living together because they don't want to
Mhm.
commit. And my son's one of those. And it's like, why? What are you afraid to commit to? Like you're living together, you're acting like you're married, so what are you afraid to commit to? So if I could help people realize the sanctity of marriage and that it is worth fighting for, and it is a beautiful thing because you have a partnership that you can help grow and collaborate. And so I really my legacy would be that I help people and I save marriages before the I
Yeah.
do and after the I do.
Exactly. So, okay, that's really lovely. That gave me the chills because it's a gift when uh someone shares not just their triumphs but the wounds they have chosen to honor. So that's what makes this conversation unforgettable. So this is one of those soul stirring conversations that what I shall say. Like that make someone want to call your therapist, your ex, your future partner, and most importantly, yourself. So, Cherish, like, thank you so much for bringing so much honesty, clarity, and depth to the way that we talk about love and decisions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed this conversation, so thank you.
Lovely, lovely. And for everyone who is listening, or maybe you will be listening, take a moment today to check in with your own relationship compass. Like, are you choosing from fear or from freedom? Are you flipping the iceberg or just skating on top of it? So, if this episode has moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And do not forget to, I mean, healthy love because starts with you. So, with this hope, until next time, stay curious, stay conscious, and stay connected to your pleasure principles. So, this is your host, Avik, signing off. Thank you so much.